Thank you for tuning in to Nevada Justice. Born and raised in Las Vegas and with over 15 years of legal experience, Attorney Andre Lago-Marcino has served as counsel in a wide variety of cases. The information you obtain from the show is not, nor is it intended to be legal advice. You should consult an attorney for advice regarding your individual situation. We invite you to contact us at 702-731-1230 and welcome your calls. Contacting us does not create an attorney-client relationship.
Good afternoon.
Happy Friday.
Happy Friday. Good afternoon, everybody.
Yeehaw.
Andre Lago-Marcino here, present with Rebecca Reyes, Max Lardent. Also our guest today, Cal Potter, who has far more than just 15 years of experience in the legal community, probably multiples of that, but we're very honored to have him here. Today's topic, police misconduct. And last week we did lawyers behaving badly. This week, police behaving badly.
Good follow-up.
Yeah, everybody just be better.
I think everybody has a profession, that some segment of the profession, there are going to be problems.
Last week was bankers and car salesmen.
Yeah, that's right. Anybody, really. But in this case, we're talking about police, which involves liberty and some of the most important rights that we have as citizens of the United States and Nevada. I remember I first became interested in police misconduct actually in law school when I took the class called criminal procedure and went in with all these grand expectations about all these rights that we had, and then soon learned probably in the first day that those rights quickly become eroded through various means, either the legislature, courts, and even the police. So I can tell you we have a formal introduction here for Cal, but I will say that I've learned a lot from Cal Potter in my legal career. I've brought him on cases because there's a virtual encyclopedia inside of that brain of his, and he can pull cases like no one else. So we're very honored to have him here.
Yes. Let me tell you a little bit about Cal Potter. Since beginning his practice in Las Vegas in 1978, Cal Potter has been an advocate for the injured and accused. His firm has represented parties in numerous high-profile cases, including cases involving wrongful death, medical malpractice, civil rights, and other injuries. His work in fighting for the rights of the injured led to his election as president of the Nevada Trial Lawyers Association in 1999, now known as the Nevada Justice Association. He has been the editor of the NTLA Advocate and has served on the Board of Governors for 10 years. He's also a member of the National Crime Victim Bar Association, the $1 Million Advocates Forum, the Texas Trial Lawyers Association, Consumer Attorneys of Los Angeles, and the American Trial Lawyers Association Committee on Traumatic Brain Injury. Welcome, Mr. Potter.
Thank you.
I'm glad you had some time with all your activities, to come here.
He's a busy man. Mr. Potter, what is it about the legal profession that interests you? Why did you become a lawyer?
I think one of the things that impressed me, I came from Arizona, and I wanted to try and help people. And so my background was in terms of constitutional law as an undergrad, and I became an investigator with the Public Defender's Office in Pima County, Arizona. And then when I came up here to Las Vegas, I wanted to work primarily in criminal defense, and I learned at a very short time that a lot of the justice that was being administered wasn't in the courthouse. And after having clients beaten or terrorized, various cases that I got involved with, the first one was an individual who had been arrested and was a basketball star at Western High School, and I won't use his name, but he was well known, but he was arrested over on what was called the West Side. And when he was booked, they booked him under the name Bill, and the N word was used as his middle name because the officers weren't interested in trying to help him. They were trying to stigmatize him, and he was confused with a brother who had been in trouble. Anyway, after the case was dismissed because he was just kind of rousted up with a bunch of other individuals, I had a Judge Tabany, who was a former police officer and was serving as justice of the peace down in Las Vegas, all the way from Henderson. He told me, you need to sue these people for what they did to your client. And this was in the late 70s, and so he says, you got to file one of those civil rights cases. And I'd never had an experience like Andre did in law school. I didn't know what he was talking about. And I started calling around. I called the ACLU, and it was a recordaphone in Reno. And there was nobody that I could find that ever sued the police here. And so I started studying about what I had to do, and that was my first case that I filed. And we recovered and made what was a very, very mean-spirited experience for my client, at least compensated him for some of the problems that he had gone through. And from there, once people learned that I had filed something, well, nobody wanted to fight with the police.
Of course.
So they would refer me the cases and say, well, this guy will do it. And so from time to time, I've either been brought in by people from out of state, or I've assisted other attorneys here in Las Vegas when they want to get involved in trying to make things right for their clients or their client's family. Unfortunately, there's so many of these cases have ended in deaths and serious injuries. So that's how Andre and I met. We're on a couple of different cases, both of them very high-profile cases where we were involved representing families who had lost family members.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things about wrongful death cases is, in a lot of ways, you don't even meet your clients. Of course, your clients are the families, but the deceased are people that you have to learn about posthumously. It's quite ironic.
And that must have been crazy to have to learn that all in yourself. I mean, not having anyone sue the police before and finding out the process and everything. Did that take a long time?
It took a lot of experience. I went to California a lot on seminars, went back to the East Coast. There was different groups. Of course, New York City and Los Angeles are really the areas where a lot of the law comes out of. So I spent a lot of time, I met Johnny Cochran before he was well known, because he was a civil rights attorney, although he did criminal defense, but that's where he really was known as in civil rights. So I did that, some cases over there. I worked up in San Francisco with Melvin Belli's office, who also did a lot of civil rights work. So I learned, kind of by going to other places to learn about what was going on in other cities.
How much experience would you say you had with police misconduct cases in particular?
Well, most of our practice for the last 35 years has dealt with police misconduct. They're more difficult cases. Like I say, I've done them in California, Arizona, New York, and so I've had quite a bit of experience. We've tried cases, and not only in misconduct but in civil rights, we do prisoner rights cases, which is kind of a even more difficult area than police misconduct, because you have clients for the most part that are still in custody at the time when you're going to trial.
So it's difficult to speak with them and get
difficult, yes, and juries aren't real, at least in Las Vegas and northern Nevada, not real sympathetic to some of the issues.
What would you say is the hardest part about taking on a case against the police?
Well, they're very time intensive. Like Andre was discussing in the cases we handled, your client in these death cases, there's nobody to speak for the client side. You have to try and dig. They have control of the facts. The families are distraught. They want answers to what happened to their loved one. And it's very difficult to find out what happened, particularly now they're doing these investigations and the reports don't come out. We used to have the coroner's inquest. At least the families were given the opportunity to go and hear what happened. Now it's kind of a closed-door situation. The district attorney's office makes a review. The police reports are kept away from the family. It's a very, very difficult situation for family members.
Talk to us a little bit, Cal, about what immunity means for police and how that can be a barrier in these cases.
Well, in the qualified immunity is one aspect. There's also absolute immunity and quasi-judicial immunity for prosecutors that bring on some of the cases. Generally, our cases our clients have been charged criminally, or they're about to be charged criminally. In the death cases, of course, there's usually not that situation, but you have to face what's called qualified immunity for the police officer. And so the police officer, if they acted in an objective fashion and the law was well settled, and then they have what's called quasi immunity or qualified immunity. and it allows them to be exonerated from what the issues might be in the case. So it's a very difficult, time intensive. You've spent all this time and money getting the case together, and then it goes in for a summary judgment, and a district court judge in federal court generally makes the determinations. And one of the things I've always said to other attorneys is that to be a good trial attorney in Las Vegas and in federal court, you have to be a good appellate attorney, because you usually have to go up to the Ninth Circuit. The case is then reversed on many of the issues, and it comes back for trial. So with all that time involved, the clients, of course, the families are wondering what's going on, why is this happening, and you may not get to trial, until 5 years after the case has been filed.
Long time to wait for answers, especially for the family members.
Have you ever gone up to the Supreme Court?
I argued in the U.S. Supreme Court on one occasion, but it wasn't a civil rights, it was a death penalty case.
Okay.
What makes you so passionate about these kinds of cases? I know that you had an early start with the Western High School student. But
I think one of the things that's always concerned me in this community is there appears to be two different communities. Las Vegas has a sad history of racial discrimination. It was segregated up until until the early 70s, although most people think about the 50s and 60s for the rest of the country. Las Vegas has what I believe is a set of rules for parts of the community, and then what I see historically is the problems with the black community. We now have a large Latino community, and I know in the cases that Andre and I have been involved with, many of the issues cut on racial issues, and nobody likes to hear that. The police department doesn't like to acknowledge that, but it's a factor that I've seen in a number of cases. I've represented, at least on 2 or 3 occasions, African American attorneys that have been victims of police abuse, and I know from my own standpoint, I remember in a deposition my client being asked how often, as an African American, he was stopped. He drove a Mercedes, and he was saying he stopped every couple of weeks by the police. And I've lived here for over 35 years. I've only had one traffic stop. So, and it's not that I'm a great driver, it's just a situation that we've seen repeatedly over the years where there are problems. We've seen the same thing with now with these shootings where individuals are unarmed, these officer-involved shootings where they're unarmed. All of the ones that Andre and I have worked on deal with African Americans. So it's a situation where I just have concerns about righting some of the wrongs that I've seen in this community. And whether it's popular, whether people like me or dislike me, that's not my job. My job is to represent my clients to the best of my ability. So that's why I'm passionate about what I'm doing.
Is it difficult keeping a police misconduct case out of the media? And do you feel like the amount of media attention it gets kind of hinders it?
No, I think it's just the opposite. I think one of the most important things is trying to get a microscope on this situation. For the most part, I believe that, as an example, Mike Blasky's work here in Las Vegas did a great deal to shed light on what was going on in these officer-involved shootings. The fact that there was no, for the most part, accountability on the part of the police in these situations. And so when the RJ got involved, it was really a big help to the community. And people started to think about, well, how did this happen? And of course, the other shooting that gained attention was the shooting out in Summerlin, and the Eric Scott shooting. That brought a lot of attention, but that was a situation where he did have a weapon, whereas the Stanley Gibson case and Trayvon Cole case, they were both unarmed, and they were both involved in situations too where we had quasi SWAT teams that weren't really SWAT teams that were carrying out the activities that SWAT would normally be doing. So.
Yeah, Mike Blasky is a great reporter for the Las Vegas Review-Journal, and it can be tough, as Cal alluded to. Sometimes people just will generalize you in a shade of whether you're a pro-cop, anti-cop, and it's really not about that. It's about rights. And Mike Blasky, Lawrence Maurer, who used to be with the Review-Journal, who I think has moved down to Florida, and others at the Review-Journal really stepped it up in bringing attention to this issue. I'm sure, Cal, you were involved and have used the Justice Department's report on the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department and the shootings. And have you seen much of a change in terms of policy after that report was issued?
Yeah, I have, and what I think is important is what's occurred within the community itself. People are now more skeptical. They know that there were so many shootings that were exonerated, and by having the Justice Department come in, I think it helped the department administration itself to say, look, we have to make some changes. There was a we and they mentality within the not only the police department but the district attorney's office on these coroner's inquests, particularly in the Cole case, where Andre and I sat through that and were asking a series of questions. In that inquest was really the first time all of our questions had been asked. We submitted questions, and it used to be a situation where the justice piece would make the determination. In that particular hearing, we were fortunate to have all of our questions not be screened and not asked, but they were screened and then asked. And there was clearly a situation, I believe, that changed, maybe not for the best, because the inquest system didn't last after the Cole case. But at least we were asking the hard questions, and I think ultimately that had a lot to do with the fact that this COPS program came in. The Justice Department took a look at all the problems that we were having here and made some recommendations, and the police department, to their credit, is following some of those recommendations in terms of training. De-escalation is the most important thing. And so we've seen situations where they may have ended up in a shooting, not ending up in a shooting at this point in time.
Have you received any negative repercussions from the community or the police force for the work you do?
Not in a long time. I mean, when I first started, they used to get told that my picture was up on dartboards, and I better watch what I was doing. So first thing I did, I stopped drinking because I didn't want anybody ever to say that I was involved in a drunk driving incident. I always tell people, that's why I'm saying here on the radio waves, that I don't drink. But for the most part, I try and treat the police officers in the cases with a professional attitude, certainly the sheriffs, and they likewise, and their attorneys have always been respectful in the proceedings. So, no, I don't think that I feel I'm being targeted or anything of that nature.
Good, no extra traffic violations. No. Well, thank you so much, Cal, for coming here and answering our questions. We're going to take a quick commercial break, and then when we come back, we have some news stories for you.
Bad boys, what you gonna do? What you gonna do when they come for you? Bad boys, what you gonna do? What you gonna do when they come for you?
Hello, everybody. Welcome back. Thank you for listening to Nevada Justice. Now, just a reminder to all our listeners, we will be accepting calls at the bottom of the hour, so please give us a call at 702-731-1230. And if you would like to get in contact with us off air, you can reach our firm at 702-383-2864. Now, it's impossible to turn on the television or read the newspaper without coming across a story about police shootings. So here's a few noteworthy ones that I found. Careful. The family of Trayvon Cole, who was fatally shot by an officer, had filed a lawsuit against Metro Police. The lawsuit named the department, as well as Sheriff Gillespie, Brian Yant, who shot Cole, and John Harney. Yant fired one shot that killed 21-year-old Cole, who was unarmed during a raid at the Las Vegas apartment he shared with his 9 months pregnant fiancée, Sequoia Pierce. Police said Cole made a furtive movement toward Yant when the detective kicked open a bathroom door and found Cole allegedly flushing marijuana down the toilet. The raid on the apartment was conducted after Cole allegedly sold 1/8 ounce of marijuana to an undercover officer, which was captured on videotape as part of a reality series.
Which one? Cops?
Yeah, it was cops.
Cops?
Was it really?
Yeah.
After 2 days of testimony, a highly publicized coroner's inquest cleared Yant in the shooting death of Cole. The 7-member jury ruled he was justified in shooting Cole, despite testimony revealing mistakes by detectives handling the case. An affidavit for the search warrant included an inaccurate criminal history for Cole, confusing him with a man of the same name with previous arrests in Los Angeles and Houston. This was not the first shooting that Officer Yant had been involved in. The lawsuit alleged violations of civil rights, civil conspiracy, battery, negligence, and wrongful death. The Cole family noted in the lawsuit that narcotics detectives who are not SWAT officers trained to execute such search warrants mishandled the raid. Metro changed that policy in the wake of the Cole shooting, now requiring any search warrant requiring the use of force to be done by SWAT officers. The case settled for $1.7 million.
Yeah, this case was a tragic case. Cal Potter and myself worked on it together from the beginning. And first of all, I want to say that the family, very good people, Trevon's family, as well as Sequoia Pierce, Nichelle Bratton, there's so many. And just gives me chills just talking about the case. It was, I think it was a case that really rattled Las Vegas at the time. There was another shooting around the same time that was also equally tragic. Eric Scott, Cal and I did not work on that case, but
That was the Summerlin one?
that was a Summerlin one. And at the time, that I think garnered a little more community outrage just because of the fact that Eric Scott was, I believe he was a former military and kind of fit the clean-cut look that a lot of people find so easily to be outraged if somebody's shot. And Trevon Cole was accused of being a small-time marijuana dealer, if you could even call him that. And I think that case has endured. Cal and I were talking before about that this was even being discussed on John Ralston's show.
Yeah, I think one of the things that really bothers I know myself as an attorney is in the Trevon Cole case, there were so many things that were upsetting at so many different levels. We believe there was a cover-up that was done, and now that Brian Yant, the shooter, is a part of the Police Protective Association and is going to go out in the community on officer-involved shootings, giving advice. I think it's counter to what the settlements discussions were, that he would never be back on the street. He would be tied to a desk. But, I think it's offensive to the community that now they feel like the union can go ahead and put him out and front him and use him as some type of rallying point for their union. I think is improper in this community. But the thing that really bothered me was the DA didn't believe Brian Yant when he was testifying either. He's trying to give him an out. Yant was adamant that he had not fired accidentally, that he had fired on purpose, which is even more egregious because he shot and killed an unarmed man. But then they tried to say that Trevon had raised his hands without a weapon, acting like he had a weapon, and then they found a chapstick in his hand. It just always bothered me that they were trying to get away with it.
Yeah, so many problems in the case for Metro. We talked about the fact that they had been filming this whole investigation, not the entire investigation, but large parts of it for cops. None of those were ever aired, but the plan was they had videotaped Trevon giving some marijuana to an undercover cop, by cops. So then you had Langley Productions, who is a producer of Cops, was donating campaign funds to Sheriff Gillespie, and both as a company and individually. And I may be wrong on the numbers, but I'm pretty sure it was $10,000 each, $20,000. That was a fact. You had a fact that Brian Yant had been involved in 2 other shootings that were very suspiciously regarded before this, and one of which he shot somebody in the back, another one where he shot somebody yards away who had a baseball bat and said he confused it with a shotgun. So and it was at the very end. I think it was a kind of a crescendo where Cal can shed more light on this because he's seen more coroner's inquests probably than he cares to remember. But I knew Cal going into that. Well, I strongly believed going into that coroner's inquest that the shooting would be found justified. But I sat there with you and our staff and our clients, and I don't think anybody didn't shed a tear at some parts of it. And at the end of that, especially as you described, seeing the DA really go after Yant, which was somewhat unprecedented at the time, I thought that there was going to be a chance that they would find it unjustified. And there were no minorities on that jury. We came back and they found it justified.
Yeah, it was really shocking, even though we had gone in figuring that it would be like every other inquest. But it was pretty egregious. And then they brought in a detective at the end to try and say that if he had thought it was a bad shooting, he would have charged the officer himself, which made no sense because why are we having the inquest then? But it was purely another cover-up angle for the jury to feel some kind of comfort that what they were deciding had already been decided. Well, I mean, if it would have been in a trial, it would have been a mistrial to pull that kind of shenanigan, but that was what the inquest, those are the problems with the inquest, and that's why we don't have it anymore. But it also did shed light on what was happening because at least you would hear what their side of the issues were. But yeah, it was a very, very tough thing for the family to sit through and listen and then build up their expectations that justice would be served and Brian Yant would be held to task, and it didn't occur.
No, and you know, sometimes you forget about the personal side of these things. Sequoia Pierce, who was Trevon Cole's girlfriend and the mother of his soon-to-be daughter, gave birth to their child just a couple days or the next day after he was shot. It was very, very soon after. And that child grows up without a father. I think that's what led to a lot of the settlement monies being given out because it was just outrageous. And I've heard from the family, I've talked to the family. She asked questions about her dad, and we've sent documents over there because they also provided us with the human side of Trevon. I mean, he had this little thing that he was doing, and it was so, considering now that recreational marijuana is probably going to be legalized here in the next few years, but that it was over just a little marijuana. It was just absolutely outrageous.
And it was worse than that because it wasn't that he was actually going out there and trying to sell it. They were trying to bring him in, and that's how the thing really kind of fell apart because he couldn't provide what they wanted. They wanted him to provide a gun and drugs up the scale, and he couldn't do that.
He couldn't do
Setting
it.
him up.
They asked, "Can you get some?" He said, "I don't know." I mean, he didn't have it.
Yeah.
And that raid was planned, as you mentioned, to be shown. So you had this situation where they had been surveilling him. They knew that he was living with somebody who was 9 months pregnant. There was a bassinet in the front doorway. They beat down this door in a less than 1,000 square foot apartment and went in there with SWAT officers armed with AR-15s and other automatic weapons and kicked down the bathroom door and shot him in the head. And it, to this day, just is the case that I will never, ever forget. An absolute travesty, what happened here. And now, as Cal said, Brian Yant, and let's not forget, Brian Yant is a human being, he has a family, and we're not going to, sit here and demonize people, but the facts are the facts. And he is now being placed in a position where he is going to be a union representative going and being involved at some level with officer-involved shootings.
When he has 3 under his belt.
When he has 3. And to me, the union, they do whatever they want, and they get away with it. And at some point you have to ask, who's complicit, who's looking the other way. I think it's just beyond me. I can't even understand it.
And it becomes an affront to the the family and what occurred in this case. Trayvon Cole case is I think one of the most egregious shootings, and so although we're like you say, we're not here to demonize Brian Yant, but he is what he is, and he shouldn't be in the serving the function. The union should be more sensitive to the needs of the community. Mm-hmm. It's not a we and they situation. I mean, most citizens support the police officers and what they're trying to do, and they support the union. But when the union makes it a we and they type situation with their own administration, and then it backfires into the community, I think that's a very, very dangerous situation.
Yeah, and we have to live here and deal with it. Yeah. And I'm afraid personally of what's going to come around the corner. I don't know.
Well, we have another article here. According to the Las Vegas Sun, in June of this year, U.S. District Judge Jennifer Dorsey said a jury must decide whether Officer Scott Tompkins used excessive force when he fired 9 rounds at Juan Antonio Solis Diaz after a brief pre-dawn confrontation at the plaintiff's home on April 22, 2010. Solis Diaz attorneys, who initially filed the suit against Metro in 2012, agreed to drop claims of negligence, negligent supervision, infliction of emotional distress, and battery against Tompkins. But the plaintiff still seeks damages for what his attorney, Kirk Kennedy, called a determined effort to put Solis Diaz down, even as plaintiff lowered his unloaded weapon. Metro attorney Thomas Diller argued that the case should be dismissed altogether because Tompkins acted reasonably given the set of circumstances he faced that morning. Plaintiff's neighbors called police at about 2:30 in the morning to report that they had heard screaming coming from the man's home. Tompkins, the first officer to arrive, initially stopped a vehicle that was near the plaintiff's driveway before letting the driver go. The plaintiff said he heard strange noises coming from the front of the house, so he grabbed an unloaded rifle and opened the garage door. After a brief exchange between the men, Tompkins fired his weapon, striking Solis Diaz once in the right hand and once on the buttocks. Kennedy contends that his client could not hear Tompkins identifying himself as an officer, nor could he see his vehicle and uniform before the garage door opened fully. Solis Diaz raised his arms and tried to back away once he realized Tompkins was a police officer, but the officer kept shooting anyway.
Well, that's an interesting case. You have a situation where you're a homeowner. You think that there may be a home intruder or a home invasion, so you grab your weapon and see what's going on. You open your garage door, and then an officer is firing upon you.
And it sounds like he was shooting at him before the door was completely open.
Yeah, so you have those factual questions, and I think what the determination that's so important that it be made by a jury, that a judge shouldn't circumvent what we used to call a jury bypass, and make the determination that should be made by the peers in the community, because those are all factual issues of what actually occurred. The officer's going to argue, in his mind he saw a gun, and I don't know the facts of the case well enough to say, well, did the officer then say put the gun down, or did he just start shooting? Right. And then you have a situation where you have a homeowner, he hears some kind of disturbance, and he's trying to protect his family and his property. He goes out and tries to see what's going on. So it makes it for a very difficult situation, but a jury should make those determinations.
Mm-hmm. Now, in an article in the Review Journal, 2 men observing a police stop watched in growing disbelief and then in horror as the seemingly routine incident turned deadly when a federal ranger shot a man inside a state trooper's patrol car. One of the men recorded video with his cell phone as a Bureau of Land Management ranger shot and killed DeAndre Berghart Jr. near the Red Rock Canyon National Conservation Area. "Oh my God, they just shot him," the man filming said after realizing what had happened. Berghart from Los Angeles had been hailing cyclists as he walked along State Route 159 near Calico Basin. 2 cyclists reported the man to officials at the Red Rock Visitor Center at about noon. The video, shot from a car stopped on the road, shows 2 rangers holding Berghart at gunpoint for several minutes as onlookers watched from cars and bicycles. Berghart doesn't appear to threaten the rangers, but remains on his feet, apparently disobeying their orders. He didn't appear to carry a weapon. One ranger sprayed Berghart with pepper spray, but didn't arrest him. Eventually, Burghardt somehow escapes one of the ranger's grasps, pushes away the trooper, and bolts for the patrol vehicle. The trooper points either his firearm or taser and backs away as Burghardt briefly stomps towards him. Burghardt climbs into the trooper's SUV. A ranger fires 8 or 9 shots from his handgun into the trooper's vehicle. Officers say Burghardt grabbed for the trooper's AR-15, which was locked in a gun rack in the car. Las Vegas police are leading the investigation into the incident with assistance from the Highway Patrol and FBI. I actually saw this video. You can see it on Review Journal's website. It's crazy.
Another unarmed individual.
Right, and that's the telling point in most of these cases. If the individual is unarmed, it's a whole different standard. So you go back to the training of the officer. What's the officer taught to do? They throw in the fact that there's a weapon, but it's secured in the car, that he was reaching for it, but he didn't have it. And so that you start looking at all these factual questions and trying to step by step, and what the officer's been trained to do, and what to look at, watch his hands, what's he doing at that point in time. Is he an actual danger? There was another case that went down a number of years ago, the Suave Lopez case, which was prior to Trevon Cole, was another unarmed man, turned out to be a bad person. He had committed a murder, issues whether the officers knew it or not, but he was handcuffed, once again in a squad car, jumps up, gets out, and runs, but he's handcuffed, and they shoot him in the back. Their theory at that point in time was that if he got away, he would be a danger to the community at large, not just the people and the officers right there at that scene. So what we've now been looking at under this COPS plan and the change of policy, at least for the Metropolitan Police Department, is it has to be an actual threat. So it has to be a situation where it would be an immediate threat, not something that could be perceived in the future or could have happened or those types of things.
Speculative.
So it's speculative. So I think that's what you're looking at in this particular case, and what's of interest on both sides is what actually happened, not what could have happened, and speculating that it was a danger when it wasn't at that particular point in time.
I remember in that Stanley Gibson case, we were taking the depositions, and one of the officers said, well, what happens if Stanley Gibson gets away and runs into a school bus or a van full of children? Right. Well, I guess what happens is a good question. Could that even happen?
Yeah, when he had 2 cars and one in front, one behind him,
and he was surrounded, dogs, helicopters. They always go to the extreme when they're defending themselves, but as a lot of defendants do. That the question again, as Cal said, is it an actual threat? And the thing to emphasize here is that law enforcement is one of the most important positions that there is out there in America. They make the determination about whether we're going to have liberty, whether we're going to be under arrest, or whether we're going to live freely. They are allowed to legally shoot people, legally. And the real issue, as Cal mentioned numerous times, training. Yeah. And the fact that somebody could get a weapon or might get a weapon, I think has to be a subject of intense training. And I think that's what we're seeing a little bit more of after that COPS report.
And the de-escalation. The de-escalation is the most important thing. Yeah. Is the officer going out there with the open mind to de-escalate, or whether he's going to escalate the situation and force the situation to turn and turn many times in a bad frame. So I think that's why it's so important of what Metro has at least been doing in terms of trying to train their officers with the de-escalation policy.
Now, we're going to go ahead and transition to some legal pointers. I just want to remind everyone that you can call into the station at the bottom of the hour and ask us any questions that you may have. Our number is 702-731-1230. And if you'd like to get in contact with us off the air, you can reach our firm at 702-383-2864. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about what you should do when you are being pulled over by a police officer. More gavel. Now, here are some tips of what you should do when you see the police car. Dre, if you want to talk a little bit about.
Well, I'll ask Max. So, when's the last time you got pulled over, Max?
I think it was a traffic stop. Let's say it was recently, like last year.
Okay.
And what was the situation?
Speeding.
Were you speeding?
Like 5 miles.
Okay. And was it a patrol vehicle or a motorcycle
I
cop?
think it was highway car.
All right. And daytime or nighttime?
Daytime.
All right. So what'd you do?
Pulled over to the shoulder, and then waited for him to come to the car.
All right. Did you roll down your window right away?
I think so. Definitely by the time he walked up there.
And did you say, was it a male or female
It was
officer?
male.
Did you say yes sir, no sir?
Right away? No, that's the first thing I should say is not that.
Cal, maybe you should say yes or no sir right away.
I think one of the most important things is when people are listening to this is you want to make sure your hands are on the wheel,
Yes.
both hands, and because officers are trained to look for your hands. They're coming up to a situation they don't know what's going to occur, and as long as you're handling the I guess the dialogue correctly, you don't put your hands out the window, but you keep them on the wheel, and then the officer respond to the officer's questions.
Yeah. Definitely don't try to hide anything or throw anything away. No sudden movements. Wait to look for your ID until they ask for it, that sort of thing.
Yeah. What about, Cal, in your experience, both as criminal defense side and on the civil rights side, what about the thought that, hey, if I'm honest with the officer, they'll let me go? So, yes, I was speeding. Yes, there's a joint in the ashtray, that type of a thing.
Well, I think it's a situation where you have to be, knowing your rights. If you're looking at it from a standpoint, you don't make any admissions, answer the questions. You have a right to remain silent if you actually think that there's something there. But it's important not to try the case on the scene. Obey the officer's command as long as you believe they're lawful commands, and you're never going to win on the scene. The officer is always going to win, so you don't want to be in a situation where you're escalating or you're making what we call the furtive gestures, where you're making quick moves or throwing something away. Or we're handling cases right now where young men were shot unarmed by reaching for something, and maybe it was following the officer's command, but they claim it was the officers claiming that it was a furtive gesture, which is the term of art. So you want to make sure that, one, you're trying to be respectful, and I don't know if it has to be yes sir or no sir, but certainly yes officer, and don't be a smart aleck, and try and do whatever the officer is asking you to do to answer the questions.
Yeah, I think there's sometimes people on the extreme constitutional end will say I don't have to answer any questions, or I will say this, it's a matter of personal safety. I've been pulled over at night, I roll down the windows, turn on the lights, hands in the 10 and 2 position, yes sir, no sir, yes officer, no officer, let me see your ID and registration. Okay, here's I'm reaching into my glove box. I mean, I kind of go overboard on it because maybe I am a little more freaked out with some of the things that I've seen and heard about, but it's a personal safety issue, and right or wrong, constitutional or unconstitutional, your life is your life. So
I started having to block Facebook friends because they started posting these videos of it's basically guys being jerks to police officers, but trying to show that they had certain rights, like didn't roll their window all the way down, very casually answer their questions without, like, indirectly.
There's no point for that, though. It just makes it a more hostile environment.
And look, it doesn't give the officer the right to shoot you, but hey, again, personal safety and follow directions.
Just cooperate. Now we're going to take a brief break here, and then when we come back, it's my favorite part. We get to play a little game with Max. So thank you for listening to Nevada Justice, and we'll be right back. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Nevada Justice. Now, this is the time where we get to quiz Max.
Yeah, because I'm not a lawyer.
Yes. Max, the question is going to be whether the police officer acted reasonably, okay? So just give me a yes or a no.
All right.
First one, an innocent man with no criminal history is stopped by police 16 times simply because he has the same name as a known criminal. The innocent man is not the same height, nor does he have any of the tattoos which the criminal is known to have. The only thing he has in common is the name and ethnicity. The innocent man is fed up with the constant harassment and trips to jail, only to be released a few hours later each time. Are they acting reasonably?
Well, it sounds like they're being a nuisance to this one particular gentleman, but I assume it's different police officers each time. I guess it's reasonable enough.
Well, I will say that there are two answers to that question.
Oh, so I can't be right.
It's a trick question.
Well, I say, I've had a case like that. I say that the police officers were acting unreasonably, but the Supreme Court of Nevada disagreed with me, and we lost a very similar case on immunity.
Yeah, and one of the issues that comes into play on those situations is the cop on the street has a different role. I mean, if he sees a warrant, he doesn't have to go through that same type of scenario to find out everything it should be done at the station. Unfortunately, that's when they get into jail, and then nobody says, well, it should have been the guy on the street. But the case law isn't real good on that on the national level either. Malley versus Briggs' case says if they stay in that instance 2 weeks in jail, that's an excessive amount of time and that's actionable. But if it's less than a 2-week period, that it wouldn't be actionable. Now, that's an older case, so maybe as time has changed, it should change. But unfortunately, there's a lot of immunity on those issues.
There was a new case that just came out. I saw there's something called a bad faith exception to the immunity, which I thought was actually a good decision for individuals, where I guess generally speaking, the Supreme Court said if a person who normally has immunity is acting in bad faith or knows they're not doing the right thing, essentially, they're not going to get that protection, which is unique for Nevada.
Yeah, and there's also been a district court case here in Nevada dealing with if it's a constitutional violation, there's no immunity involved. If it's an intentional act, also, there's no immunity involved. So hopefully maybe the pendulum is swinging back the other way for individual rights.
Okay, next one.
Next one.
A man is involved in an altercation at his home, and the police are called in due to the disturbance. He's not read his Miranda rights. He's taken into custody and put in a holding cell. Once released, he tells an attorney that he has been brutally beaten by police during his stay in jail. However, the client has no markings, bruises, or scars. Did the police act reasonably?
Well, there's kind of two parts to this one, but not reading the Miranda rights alone, I think, is enough to say that's unreasonable.
Cal?
Well, Miranda doesn't really come into play unless he makes a statement. So even though we hear this all the time, people come and say they didn't read Miranda. Well, did you make a statement? No. So it doesn't really matter in that sense. But the individual's rights are important in terms of the beating. Was it memorialized in any way?
So,
Perfect.
okay.
Well, I would like to thank Attorney Cal Potter from Potter Law Offices. You can reach him at 702-385-1954. Max Lardent, Brandon Feiter, whose music can be purchased on iTunes, for Tumbleweed Town, Joyce Vetter for Home Means Nevada, and of course, Andre Lago Marcino.
All right.
Thank you, everyone, for listening.
See you next week.
Way out in the land of the setting sun, where the wind blows wild and free, there's a lovely spot, just the only one that means home sweet home to me. If you follow the old Kit Carson trail until desert meets the hills. Oh, you certainly will agree with me. It's a place of 1,000 thrills. Home means Nevada, home means the hills, home means the sage and the pines. Out by the Truckee, silvery rills, out where the sun